Hello and welcome to M&A Murders and Accusations, the good, the bad, and the ugly of selling your business. We dig into what you need to know and how not to kill the sell of your business. Now here's our host, Rick J. Krebs, Mergers and Acquisitions Advisor.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to M&A Murders and Accusations, the good, the bad, and the ugly of selling a business. Today, M&A is going international, and I'm so excited to have Professor and Dr. He likes to be called just Joe, but it's Dr. Joe Mahoney with us today. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Rick. That's really kind of you, and thanks so much for inviting me on.
You're sure welcome, and we're happy to have you, and I'm sure the listeners are excited to hear what you have to say. So Joe is coming to us from Wales in the United Kingdom, and I'm really excited to learn what he has to share with us from across the big water. Joe teaches, he's a professor at Cardiff University in Wales, and we're going to just call him Joe instead of professor. But he brings over 30 years of experience advising and consulting business owners on building the value of their business prior to a sale of their business. And I keep talking about this and preaching it, but it's all about moving their thinking patterns from income generation to value creation. So before we get into it, Joe, I always like to introduce you personally. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you got started.
Sure. Thank you, Rick. So, as you said, I'm a professor of consulting at Cardiff University. I started in the consulting industry, corporate and then independent and then internal consultants, and I kind of went up through the ranks. After a while, I got a bit exhausted, and so about 25 years ago, I decided to come to academia. I love teaching. I love the students. And I started the first management consultancy course in the UK. And then I realized there were no decent textbooks on consulting. So I wrote the textbooks. And then my friends who I left in consulting kind of bumped up against partner and decided to leave and start their own firms and came to me for advice. Now, this was 20 years ago, and there was virtually no evidence-based advice for boutique professional service firm owners. And so I thought, well, this is a great opportunity to do some research. So I spent lots of time researching. I gave away, advice for free because they were friends. And then after about 6 or 7 years of not getting paid for it, I thought, listen, I need to take my own advice. So I now split my time half at the university, where I write, teach, and research about the boutique consulting industry and professional service firms generally, and then half of my time I advise consultancies mostly, sometimes other professional service firms on growth and exit. Typically, my clients are between 20 and 120 people, usually founders that want a strategic exit, but sometimes it's private equity. And I kind of mix the two worlds up. My students learn from my practical experience, and my practical work is informed by my research.
Interesting. So 2 things. One, I always ask my guests to tell us something cool about yourself that most people wouldn't know.
Okay. 2 things, I guess. One is I was on the Dragon's Den many years ago in the UK. So it's a slightly softer version than the US version. And it was based on some company I set up in the telco industry 20 years ago. Didn't get funding. It might have been a different story if I did. And the second thing is, and it's quite unpopular these days because there's so many MMA things out there, but I'm not a bad boxer. I'm not the best because I'm old and slow now. But when I was younger, up until about 10 years ago, I used to really enjoy boxing. But since kids, I've got old and fat and can't do it anymore.
Interesting. Thank you. So moving on to the business side. So would you dissect for me, when I think about management consulting, and my mind goes in a lot of different ways, would you dissect what management consulting is, please, for us?
Sure. So it kind of splits into three subsections. You can cut it up lots of different ways. David Meister, the famous American who led the research on this, split it up into brains, experience, and process-based consulting. Brains is solving unique problems. Experience are typically I think he called it gray-haired consulting. It's people that have been there and done it. They're solving problems that they've seen many times, but their clients have perhaps only seen once or twice. And then process-based consulting, which is highly method-based. But typically, management consultancies identify a problem. They help define the solution to the problem. And then increasingly, they help solve the problem.
Identify. What was the second one? So they identify the problem.
You identify the problem, then you identify the solution.
The solution.
And then you help implement the solution. So
Gotcha.
It might be, look, Rick, your marketing is terrible compared to your competitors. So that's identifying the problem, and it might specifically be around around your content interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And the solution, after a bit of research and investigation, might be you need to launch a podcast. And then helping you implement that would be, doing the editing and the process and all the rest of it. So it used to be in the old days. I mean, McKinsey would say that implementation isn't really, or would have said implementation isn't consulting. But these days, everyone's doing it because clients, quite rightly, got annoyed because people would come in, provide great strategies, and then disappear.
And then people fail because they don't know how to implement it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So even McKinsey now do the implementation stuff because they're very wary of dropping $250,000 present slide deck and then walking away, and then the client's stuck with not knowing what to do with it.
$250,000 they spend on it, and then it just wastes away in the.
Yeah. The 80s and 90s are littered with at least $250,000, especially from McKinsey, Bain, and Boston Consulting Group. Those slide decks that would sit in your drawer, or more lately on your hard drive, gathering dust.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing that people are doing more implementation now, because it means that there's greater success rates. The trouble is with the consulting industry, it's become so competitive. Clients have got much smarter. Everyone's got an MBA, it seems, these days. And there's more consultants out there, chasing a smaller and smaller amount of work.
That's interesting, because consulting can go in so many different ways. Right? Business fundamentals, marketing, digital media. There's just so many different ways. And we had a group. I'm president of a Utah chapter of Exit Planners, and we bring in business owners, we bring in sellers and advisors. And there was a business owner there, and it was very interesting. We asked him, "What's it like to consider the sell of a business and be here?" And he indicated, he said, "Rick, we get so much information that it's really hard for us to know who to trust." And you probably see that in the consulting world. There's so many different consultants, so many different people out there offering services, and business owners are just wondering where to go, who they can trust. And they see the need, right? We identify the need, especially when you're looking at a future exit, but it's like, okay, now what? And I think there's a hesitancy because there's so much, so they do nothing.
Yes.
Right, out of the 100 people that are approaching them, you just pick one and you're going to do well. But they don't pick any because they're bombarded and overwhelmed by all of the people that are approaching them. So
yeah, definitely, especially in the world of social media and digital marketing. And it used to be something that consultancies didn't do because it was seen as a little bit dirty. McKinsey always used to say we don't sell, people come to us. Well, they sell now because everyone else is selling. So we don't advertise, people come to us. But trust is crucial. Consultancy is what they call, what economists call a credence good, in that you're not guaranteed an outcome. And with goods like that, trust is everything. And so, it's different. If you're buying an iPad and it doesn't work, you take it back, you say, hey, give me my money back. This iPad doesn't work.
Yeah.
But if you get a badly implemented change program, then the contract will be such that you're probably as liable as the consultancy, and it's going to end up costing you a fortune to go through the courts. So trust is everything, which is why, if you excuse my language, it pisses me off a bit that that there's so many, there's so many people saying, oh, just sell your consultancy or sell your stuff through advertising on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not really the way that trust builds up. So it's still very much a relationship-based business.
Wow, that is so true. In the world of technology, it really is about relationships and people. So help me understand, if I'm a business owner and I'm confused and I'm trying to find someone to help me with management consulting, what would you suggest? If you put yourself in a business owner's seat for a minute, how do they pick a good one?
Yeah, that's a $1 billion question, isn't it? We're talking about a $400 billion industry, and it all hangs around that question. And what people used to do, they used to use brand as a substitute for trust. So if you went from McKinsey, you're paying $2,000 an hour for one of their consultants, so they're probably pretty good. So you've got this great brand effect.
Yeah.
But over the years, people have realized that throwing 200 MBAs from Harvard at a problem isn't necessarily the best way to solve that problem. So there's been this massive growth in boutique, smaller consultancies, and the way that people find them typically is, number one, through recommendations. So if you look at the research, the biggest route for finding consultancy, other than the consultants that you already work with, is through trusted recommendations. What have your friends used? What have your people in your peer group used, and what do they say? And then things like thought leadership. You might look at the papers that they publish, the research that they've done, the cases that they've done in the past. And then finally, you might do, if it's a big enough project, you might go through procurement, if you're at a big firm, and then you do the formal request for proposal, request for information, and then do a sort of scoring matrix to find the right one, which isn't, in my view, the best way to find good consultancies, because it generally ends up as a competition on cost.
So my next question is, we had spoken earlier about AI, and I was intrigued by how AI, everyone's talking about AI right now. I think it's a very powerful tool. It's like the European sports car that's sitting in the driveway and we have the keys and we don't know how to drive it. No one knows what to do with it. They understand it's powerful, right? And we'd love to get in that driver's seat, but I was intrigued by that, and I'm wondering how AI is changing the consulting and professional service space.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because there's a huge amount of hype out there, and obviously nothing is going to live up to the hype, the hype cycle. And those cycles have been going on since the 1950s about AI. But it is slightly different this time, because now we have generative AI, and it's something that anyone can interact with because it uses. So I'm writing a book on this at the moment. I'm kind of collecting stories about what works and what doesn't, and the risks and all the rest of it. I've been involved with a couple of AI implementations in consultancies, but the key thing here is that at the moment, most generative AI is being used at the task level. So, in other words, if you're a consultant in a large company or a small company, and you want to improve your proposal, or you want it to write a first draft of a proposal, or you want to get feedback on a proposal, AI is pretty good at that. If you want it to knock up a PowerPoint from some of your notes, It's not bad at that. It does the job that a junior analyst or a junior consultant might do. It's very good at analyzing qualitative data. It's not as good as a PhD researcher would be, but it's not bad. And there's various other different tasks that it can help you with very effectively. And there was a good piece of research done by Boston Consulting Group that showed for your average consultant using AI can do tasks 40% higher quality and about 20% faster. Figures might be slightly different, but it was in that ballpark. The challenge is process rather than task. So what we don't have at the moment is an AI that will, listen to your interviews, analyze them, write the report, and then write a proposal based on that. So it's the link up of these different tasks where that capability, it's kind of emergent now, but we're really talking 2024, 2025 to get that working. Once we've done that, then we're talking about moving from the process to the firm. And this is where things get interesting. Because if I'm a consultant with a whole load of knowledge, but there's an AI that has the same knowledge as me, can analyze the data faster, come up with good recommendations, why on earth as a client wouldn't I use the AI rather than paying, £1,000 an hour for a strategy consultant? So I think we're right at the beginning of the journey. There's some things it can do pretty damn well at the moment, but there's other things where there's a long way to go. And nobody really knows how far down that path we're going to go.
Okay, you've just blown my mind.
It's crazy some of the stuff it can do. I use it every day, probably every hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're talking about an AI tool that you could type in or listens to the interviews with each of the people, and then it crafts a strategy based on the experience and what it's learned. Wow.
Go on.
No, go ahead.
So literally today I had so when I bring on board a new client, I give them a questionnaire. It's manual. They give me 300 questions. They give me answers, and then I sit down with them for 2 hours and go through the answers and ask them follow-up questions. It usually takes me a day to get all of that stuff together, get the priorities right, get the themes coming out, and all the rest of it. What I did for the first time today, I did that myself, and I got it down to 10 prioritized actions that I felt the client should do in order to maximize their value for exit. I then took the transcription from AI and put it through AI with the answers to the questionnaire and asked it to come up with 10 prioritized action items. And it came up with exactly the same list as I did.
Wow.
Yeah. Now that's worrying. I've been in the industry for 25 years. And I'm I write about this stuff. I research it. I teach it. And it was doing as good a job, maybe not exactly, but it was 90% of the way there without any training. That was just pure using GPT-4.
Putting it in.
Yeah.
So as a tool for you as a consultant, the way I could see it going was you could put it in and ask for those 10 things and have them within seconds. And then you apply your knowledge and experience and judgment to that. And
you mean me as a consultant or me as a client?
You as a consultant.
As a consultant.
Yep. You as a consultant for your recommendations for the client.
Yeah. So that's what we're getting at the moment. My research, I did a survey recently, and I found that 3/4 of consultants were using AI, but 3/4 of them weren't telling anyone about it. So they weren't even telling their bosses. And there's a good reason for that.
Wait a minute. They weren't telling anyone.
Yep. Yeah. So they were pretending it's there. So I'm assuming here. Because a lot of consultancies, a lot of professional service firms have banned the use of AI because of client confidentiality. They don't want their researchers or their consultants uploading client data to the cloud. But consultants are doing it anyway. So this is really worrying for the industry. But the next step is, if this is what generative AI is like after 18 months, in 5 years' time, why bother having a consultant? Why not just have a bot?
So it has the power to wipe out an entire industry or a segment.
Well, it already has. So what you'll find, if you do a search for transcribers now, they're not there. So the Cardiff University used to spend about 3 million a year on human transcribers that would transcribe recorded interviews, and consultancies used to do that as well.
Yeah.
That industry doesn't exist anymore. It was wiped out in 2023. And people don't really talk about, people have been talking about AI complementing our work.
Yeah. But the transcriptionists are all looking for jobs now. And the university's happy because they save a couple million pounds a year. Right?
Yep. Yeah. So no one knows the limit of this at the moment. So it may well be that it stops at kind of general practitioner level. Your average doctor already provides worse diagnoses than artificial intelligence that's been trained on medical databases. But psychologically, people would much rather go to a human doctor.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's going to be the same with consultants.
I could see it totally changing the medical industry, because the insurance companies, they don't want to pay a doctor. It's much less expensive because, over here, for the big insurance companies, it's a lot about money. It really is. And if they can have an AI tool that does a diagnosis quicker than a doctor, and it's pennies compared to hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars, they're going to go that route. Wow.
Yep.
Wow. I'm going to be thinking about this all day now, Joe.
Sorry, guy.
I love it. I love it. So let's talk about AI and how it helps business owners who are looking to sell. How does it build value? I think I know, but I want to get your opinion on it.
Okay, so I can only talk about the professional service industry because that's the one I know. If you ask me about tech or insurance, I don't know. But
okay,
what I'm seeing is two broad areas of AI that are helping business owners. One is internally saving money. So if you can get AI to analyze an interview or to generate a draft of a document, you're saving a few hours of a consultant's time. And it's the same with any other type of automation. This stuff is slightly more intelligent than your normal automation approaches. Okay. So, and it's accessible to everyone. It's not costing, my subscription to GPT-4 cost me $20 a month.
Yeah, it's not.
So internally, it's all about saving time, but also potentially improving quality. Because what has surprised people is how creative AI is. So if you're going into a meeting or you're planning a workshop or you're doing a presentation, if you ask GPT-4 or Bard or whatever to come up with a set of ideas, probably going to be surprised at how creative and useful it is. So it's number one, reducing costs. Number two, improving quality of output. But then on the other side of the equation, you've got the services for the clients themselves. So if you're a consultancy or any service provider, for example, you might say, well, instead of you submitting a question to our consultants for this project, why don't you just ask the AI bot? Instead of us going away and doing the research for you, why don't you use this AI that we've trained on our databases? So again, it's saving you money as a consultancy, but it's also providing potentially a better service to your clients.
Gotcha.
So, in terms of exit, saving money, increasing quality, and happier clients, then you're maximizing your value.
Wow, all at a fraction of the cost, right?
Yeah. Can I give a caveat here, Rick? Because
yes,
I don't want and I know your listeners are worldly wise, but I don't want them all rushing off and starting, spending a lot of money in terms of AI or automation or SaaS or whatever. If you own a professional service firm, generally speaking, software development, tech, automation, AI can be, if you wanted it to be, can be a very, very big investment. I would always encourage business owners to start small, test the market, test the process, see if it works, build from there, rather than what I've seen some people do. Consultancy owners always look at SaaS products and think, oh, look at the multiples these guys are getting. Consultancies only get a multiple of 7 to 10. If you've got a software business, it's 20, 30.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's going down a little bit now, though. That's softening a bit.
Yeah, sure. And it's with the bigger firms, of course. But the key thing here is businesses don't realize how expensive software can be. So if you're doing any of this stuff, start small.
Gotcha. I love that. And don't try and take on too much.
Yeah.
And I could see people just throwing a bunch of money at it, and it's just like flushing it down the toilet. They just
and it's crazy. There are people that will, I put a request on to help someone integrate a bot into my website yesterday, and I had offers ranging from $8,000 down to $120. So there will be people that will charge you the earth simply because there's so much ignorance about this area.
Oh yeah, yeah, interesting. So let's shift gears here a little bit and talk about preparing for a sale. So I could talk about AI all day, but I want to get to the nuts and bolts for the listener. So if a business owner is thinking about a sale, how should a firm get itself in a sellable state? What are a lot of the low-hanging fruit that you see, Joe?
Okay, so again, I'm focusing on professional services.
Okay.
So we're talking law firms, marketing agencies, research firms, consultancies. There's a lot of them out there.
Engineering firms.
Anyone? Go on.
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking about engineering firms, and I'm thinking about not just professional services, but if you're a services-based business, we have a lot of those here. So go ahead. Yeah,
sure. Yep. So, I really loved what you started off with. You said, it's not about maximizing revenue, it's about maximizing value. And there's a lot of very valuable, very high revenue firms out there that are worth nothing because without the founder, they're not worth anything.
Yep.
So I'm a big, I love the 3-phase approach in terms of you start a company, you grow a company, and then you scale a company. And when you're growing a company, you're really just trying to work out what the hell you are going to be about. What's the most profitable? What's high growth? What do you enjoy doing? Where are the minimal competitors? I always come at these things from a buyer's perspective. If I'm buying a company, I want minimal founder dependence. Because if they get hit by a bus, I don't want 3/4 of the clients disappearing because they've got the relationship with the senior person.
Yep. Hold on one second. So
go on.
I say that businesses need to run better in the owner's absence than their presence.
That's really nice. Yeah.
So you're saying the same thing. It's so heavily dependent on the business owner. And sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted
No. I really like that phrase. That's one I'll reuse if you don't mind.
Please do. Share it, use it. Let's do it.
And it's true as well, because some of these owners, you get to a certain size and they're still micromanaging. And it's like, go and take a long holiday and see what happens to performance.
That's right.
So that's the first thing. And the other thing is intellectual property, which sounds like an odd phrase if you're talking about a people business. But, I talked earlier about the 3 types of consultancy: brains, experience, and process. The trouble with brains and experience-based consultancies is that it's very much people-based. And those people can walk out the door. So the more process, templates, methods, checklists that you can build into your system so that the value is in the firm, it's not in the people. Don't get me wrong, great people is, part of your intellectual property is your recruitment, training, and development programs. So by all means, invest in those. But you shouldn't be a company that's dependent on, 5 great rainmakers who bring in all the cash, or that one guy who works 24 hours a day and always manages to pull it out of the bag. You want systems, predictability, and processes ideally throughout the firm, but that's difficult for a small consultancy. But that's the ideal you want to be moving towards.
I love that. And I had a business owner tell me once that their job was to design processes. And I've always thought, and to put people in those processes, because if you lose an employee and you have a good process, you're just going to find another person you can plug into that process. Right. I almost think processes is as important or more important than the right people.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, definitely. And there's that great book by, it's called The E-Myth. Is it by Gaber or Graeber? Another US guy. And, you know, he says that, you know, there's a problem with great people, and that is that the process bends around them. So, you know, if you've got Marjorie in accounts who always pulls it out of the bag, works 24 hours a day, then why bother creating a process that's perhaps going to constrain her? So in some ways, it's better to have just average people who are following a brilliant process than it is to get brilliant people who don't have a process.
Gotcha. And it's easier to scale. You get good processes, and then you can scale easier. Trying to find that one person that's the rainmaker working 24 hours a day, those are few and far between, right?
Yeah.
But the good processes in place, then it enables you to scale and opens the pathway for that. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the final thing that, you know, I could talk loads about the financial side, the EBITDA and the growth and, you know, the margins and all the rest of it. But the other thing I would say from a buyer's perspective is typically if I'm a strategic buyer, I want you to fill a very specific hole in my offering. So, you know, I've got a great offering, but I've got no presence in Germany. Or I've got these 4 great products, but there's a big gap in the middle around automation or whatever.
Yeah.
So the more you can define yourself very precisely as, you know, filling a very specific need, it's much more likely you're gonna get interest from a lot of buyers, which then generates a bidding war by which your multiple will increase.
I love it. I just wrote that down. Defining yourself with a specific need that would attract the strategic buyers who are willing to pay more for the business pushes the price up. Love that. And it's more of with the buyer pool is going to be smaller, but the buyers are going to be more excited about it. In fact, I think excited is too small of a word. I think they're going to be ecstatic.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And the other side of that is if you've developed 3 or 4 service lines. I was literally having this conversation before I jumped on this call. Great company, decent EBITDA, but they've got 2 very different service lines. And I said to them, look, you either run 2 companies or get rid of one of them, spin one of them off. Because there's no way number one, there's no way a buyer is going to buy both of those. They're going to buy one and get rid of the other one.
They're too different.
And that's going to be less valuable. But the other thing is, as a client of yours, as someone who might be buying your services, I want to know that you are the specialist in this area and are going to do the best work. And that's why I'll go to you. If you're doing, 2 or 3 disparate things, I'm not going to think you're a specialist. So I'm certainly not going to pay top whack for your services.
So they see them more as generalists and they don't know. So they're trying to put a square peg into a round hole with that, right? They just don't know quite how it fits. But if they clearly define their service or product, they know exactly where it fits. You can connect the dots for them. It's much better.
Yeah. So I always say it's like, if you're, now you can't do this in the UK, or you can do it in the UK, people tend not to, but if you're shopping around for the best brain surgeon, you're not going to go to the brain surgeon who also does knee surgery and back surgery. You're going to go to the brain surgeon that does brain surgery every day and therefore are likely to be much better at it, but also are probably likely to charge a lot more for it.
Yeah, you're going to the specialist.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I'm seeing that there are more specialists out there because there's so much knowledge and information in specific disciplines that it seems like we're all becoming specialists.
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on there. Number one, societally, and the world has just become so complex, it's impossible to get all of that in one person's head. And so this sort of the Renaissance man they used to call them, that had this, was brilliant at everything. You just can't do it anymore. The other thing, I guess, is social media advertising and marketing rewards specialism. So the algorithm on Google is much more likely to point someone your way if you do a very specific niche, rather than, if Rick's offering M&A services across the board, then you're competing with, PwC, KPMG, and all the big ones.
Yeah.
You're never going to be able to outspend them. But if you're offering M&A services to boutique professional service firms based in the UK, then people might find you.
Interesting. I love that. I love it. So one more question before we go, and that is, if you were a business owner preparing for a sale, what 3 things would you do to increase the value and make it better prepared?
So listen, are we talking a year out, or 3 years, or 6 months out?
Let's talk a year. Let's say that there's someone, because some of these people, I was talking to one yesterday, Joe, and they're like, we're out of gas. We just don't have time to take 3 or 4 years and get ready for an exit. I call them old, tired, and worn out.
Yeah.
OTWs. They're out of gas.
Yeah.
And they need to retire, but they've got a little time. We've got, typical process takes 2 to 12 months.
Yeah.
The sales process, but so they do have a year to prepare before they take it to market. What 3 things would you do?
Okay, so the first thing is not to do some things. So what you don't want to be doing is, decreasing your EBITDA by investing in long-term programs. I've seen it happen where someone says, oh, now's the time to get a new CRM so we look more professional. Well, whoever's buying you is going to have their own CRM system. Anything to do with back office, you're not putting money into that, because your back office is probably going to be sacked. Or at least, the buyer will insist on you using their systems. So that's one thing not to do. I guess another thing is to really double down on your value proposition. So buyers don't have time to work out what you are about. It needs to be front of house. It needs to be clear on your website what problem you solve, who do you sell for, what's your solution, and that will just help buyers. A good advisor, M&A advisor, will obviously put together an executive summary, and that's part of the storefront. But your website, your marketing materials, your brand, you should be known for X, and that will help generate more interest in your firm. Another thing, I guess the third thing is another thing perhaps that you shouldn't do that sometimes people say you should do, which is around artificially inflating your margin. So you might sell off, a couple of buildings, you might make a couple of people redundant, you might, get rid of that high cost license to a database. Now, due diligence will pick up on that. And so when you can't sweep stuff under the carpet, because this, again, is a trust relationship. And as soon as a buyer feels that you have hidden something from them, or you've started to massage the figures, trust just goes out the window. So my number one piece of advice during that process is no surprises. Which means, go on.
I say things are better disclosed than discovered.
Oh God, definitely. Definitely.
Sorry, I interrupted you, but I'm like,
no. I mean that's pretty much where I'm going with this, and that also applies to clever accounting. And it may well be you have an accountant saying, "Oh, look, we can sell this off or whatever," but everything you've done financially in the final year will be scrutinized, so that your adjusted EBITDA actually reflects what your company is like. And if you've been throwing the cannons off your ship to make it lighter, then they're going to find out.
That's right. And they're going to be mad. They're going to feel like they're deceived, right? And they're cheated. And the first question is, why did you do it? But the second question is, well, what else did you do that I'm missing?
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, once you find one thing, and I've helped with due diligence projects, once you find one thing, the trust goes and you think, well, what else is hidden that we haven't found?
Yeah, exactly. So I would love to pick your brain about things to do in the long term, but I think I'm going to refer people to you and you can answer those questions through an engagement. So they
Thank you, Rick.
they can get with you. And I'm sure you'd love to help people in the US as well. So
Oh yeah, I've got 3 US clients at the moment. I don't, because I'm part-time at the university, I don't take on a huge number. I typically I've got 4 board roles, and probably about 4 or 5 clients on the go each time. But there's typically, monthly advisory sessions around specific problems. But yes, very keen to speak to people if they're interested.
Okay, well, that sounds great. And how would they get in touch with you, Joe?
I'm on LinkedIn, so you can just type in Joe O'Mahony and you'll find me. Or you can go to joeomahony.com, and I've got a website with loads of free resources for people that are growing boutique professional service firms.
Terrific. Joe O'Mahony, I so appreciate your time, Joe. And he told me I don't have anything to do now, but it is beer 30 over here in England. So
it is. I'm going to meet some old friends for a beer, which is, as a father of 2 little boys, is a rare thing these days.
Oh, yes. So good for you. And we're just starting our day here and you're just ending it. But we sure appreciate your time, Joe, and your willingness to share your vast knowledge and experience in this space, and been very helpful. So today we've talked about the good. I don't think we've got much bad or ugly, but today is the good, that M&A, mergers and accusations, the good of selling a business and how to scale it and make it worth more when you sell. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. And thank you, Joe, for being our guest today. And have a great day, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you for attending our podcast. We invite you to join us for future episodes of M&A, Murders and Accusations, the good, the bad, and the ugly of selling your business. You can also visit us at www.bsalesgroup.com or email Rick directly at rick@bsalesgroup.com.